Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Ihsan.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And it is episode 95, getting really close to 100. 95 of the podcast. It's December 14th, 2022, as we record this. Today, we're going to be doing a year in review, kind of a personal review and also a review of the podcast. And yeah, we'll just talk about review in general, reflection.
Yeah.
No new
It's that
patrons
time of
this
year.
week. It is. It totally is. And we totally still need topic suggestions. We didn't get any email suggestions from you guys, so you can put them on our Facebook group. You can email us direct, writercraftpodcast@gmail.com. You can make comments on the website, the podcast. You can do comments on the YouTube channel, but we need to know what you want to talk about for 2023. And no patron announcements. I just want to remind folks about the new pricing tiers for the Writercraft Writing Retreat. Right now, the early bird price, which is available till the end of January, is $800. And also, I don't know if I mentioned this last week or not, but I did get an email request about it. There is a shared pricing price also. So if you are coming with another writer and you want to share lodging, then the ticket's only $650. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but it's been a couple of people have asked about that for this coming year. So I wanted to just mention it. Okay, that's my announcements for the podcast. And do you have any announcements?
Just plugging away, writing a book over here.
Right.
Feeling the end of the year come on. Just that's the writer update for me. It's I'm like kind of hip deep in the process. Actually, as we discussed off air, I'm sending you some short stories, the first batch of Patreon stories. I'm gonna send those to you at the end of the week. So that project will be lifting off, I guess, right after the confetti and champagne go away after New Year's. And so that's my like hopeful launch into 2023 is will kind of starts at the end of this week. So what about you, writer? What do you got going?
Well, I'm chomping at the bit. Like, I just want to put this book out. It's done, it's written, I've got the cover and everything, but I'm still doing the, little publishing stuff. I need to do the keywords. That's been on my list for a couple of weeks. So I need to go through Publisher Rocket and get the keywords and the categories. I have a general idea, but I just want to do the research and make sure I'm picking the best ones.
Right.
And a lot of my time last week was spent on I spoke at a conference yesterday. So at the Essential Gathering for the Author Life community. And so I was prepping for that. So that was kind of my author life work last week, was getting ready for the conference talk.
Author Life Conference. That kind of comes together, right?
Yeah.
The Author Life community.
Yeah.
Which is a great community, which you've introduced me to. It's a lot.
There's a lot there. I mean, I've been in it for years and years. I think I got into it pre-pandemic, actually. I was like, oh yeah, I'll try this out. And I kind of dabbled with it. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, wow, this is my community now. This is who I can talk
right
to
now. This is what I need.
So yeah, I kind of dove into that. And so I've been there ever since. I really like them. One other episode, or not episode, but announcement. I just wanted to remind folks about the 100th episode that's happening January 18th. So I really would love to have your clips that I can play on the air, or if you can't figure out how to send audio files or whatever, you can just send us a message and I can read that out for you on the podcast. But just some comment. Yeah. And I do need those clips by January 11th at the latest. So,
okay.
Yeah, what did I do this week? Yeah, mostly just get ready for the conference. I went and saw my dad. I hadn't seen him for maybe 6 weeks. I try to see him every month. He lives about 45 minutes away, but Ali had been sick, so we didn't go anywhere. And so that was nice. I was able to do that. I'm just working extra hours at the bookstore right now, and yeah, that's pretty much been my week has just been extra retail hours and getting ready for the podcast or for the conference, excuse me.
And and when is the day you're done at the bookstore? When
The
is the official,
23rd. Yeah, my last day at the bookstore is the 23rd, and then we fly out the next day to Costa Rica with my dad
oh my gosh.
and then so I'll be able to kind
The
of
23rd of
relax.
January, correct?
Yeah.
Correct, January. Right, okay.
Yeah, it's not just in a
Well,
couple
that's right
days.
around my birthday. So I'm getting a birthday present. You're getting a birthday present, my birthday present. That is like freelance life. That's great.
Celebration time. Come on. All
What are you reading?
right. I am still reading The Golem and the Genie. I'm most of the way through. Thought maybe I could make a big dent in it yesterday, but the conference that I went to, the online conference, was Eastern time, and we're recording this in Oregon, which is Pacific time. So
yeah,
that meant I was getting up at 4:30 to attend the conference. So I was really knackered yesterday. So I didn't get around to reading, but tonight is my
there's a
hot tub
fun word,
reading night.
knackered.
Knackered. I like that word.
I love it. Yeah.
But I do have my next book picked out. Super excited about
There you
this.
go.
It's a Heather Weber book. I recently discovered her, and she just totally writes the kind of stuff I love, which is small town, strong women, little tiny hint a bit of magical realism, modern day. So
A
that just
little
seems to
taste.
be, yeah, it's just seems to be my favorite thing. So, and these take place in the South, which I've always had a little bit of interest in. A pull to, I don't know, I like Southern accents. I like, I've only I haven't visited the South very much at all. I mean, my sister lives in Florida now, but I kind of don't count that. I don't know why.
My wife's from Georgia, and I think the South is like what we expect the South to be, and then you can kind of lop Florida off as like, I don't know. It's sort of like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if anybody's from Florida, like my cousin's from Florida, I've got people in Florida. There's good things in Florida, but I don't equate it with the South. I have a new client from Lenox, Georgia, which is about as deep South as you get. And there's just such a culture. He's even said it, like you get over that line, it's a different world into Florida. And
I think that's probably because there's so many like snowbirds, and I almost called them expats. Not expats. They're still,
well, I think
I think there's just a bunch of different cultures coming in from all over the US, and that's maybe why it's diluted and there's pockets, I'm sure, of bayou, like there's places where,
in my exploration of the South, I feel like that the South still isn't a homogenized part of the country. It still feels a little bit to me like you get outside of Atlanta. Whenever I go with my wife to Georgia, we usually end up in Athens, and Athens feels like a college town, but it feels like a college town in a different part of the world than Eugene or Bloomington, Indiana, or any of those places. It just feels very different. And I think they cling to that. People in the South cling to that in a good way and maybe a bad way, but it's worth going. I haven't been to Georgia for like 6 years. I'm kind of ready to go again.
I've always wanted to go since I was a teenager, because I had an older friend. She was maybe, I don't know, 5 years older than me or something. And she was,
so she was like 21 or 22.
Right. Yeah.
Which at that time seemed older.
Yeah. She was a nanny to a family in Georgia. So she lived in Georgia for about a year, and she came back with a Southern accent and everything. I was like enamored.
My wife has like a bunch of friends
when you're 13.
My wife, when she has a bunch of friends that are obviously from Atlanta, but her one friend who speaks with the most steeped Southern accent is from San Francisco. She only lived in the South when she went to college, but she somehow picked the accent up there. But there are some people that, like, my we are in a really fun sort of diatribe here. I love it. But my wife's cousin, her mom, my wife's aunt, has this like intoxicating Southern accent. It's like mannered Southern drawl with a little like Jewish flair to it, you know. So she's saying like things and like Yiddish things in a Southern accent. It's
This is your mother-in-law?
well, this is my wife's cousin's mother.
Okay.
Right. So she's
Family,
from,
yeah.
she's a little bitty woman who golfs, you know, 5 days a week and like trolls around the retirement community with, you know, just very unique accent and like language combinations that like, you know,
Oh,
she's
that's
Jewish. So she's like, she'll
delicious.
throw out
Yeah.
Yiddish terms and it's like, but she sounds like she's calling you in for grits and collard greens. So it's a different part of the world. Visit the South, people. I had a really, like, when we were talking about what we're reading kind of parts of the conversation, I had a revelation. I texted you about it. Like, I read my kid books and I'm reading him now. I'm reading him books that I read when I was young. So I should be including those in my reading updates because I'm reading those books. So I just read The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin with him, which you want to talk about terms like knackered and, you know, just nuanced language. I had to stop reading that book constantly to explain to him what certain words meant. And it was so much fun to be like, no, respite means rest, or isle is another word for island. It's because Ursula Le Guin is a beautiful writer in every way, but it's like intoxicating with like new words, you know? So we read that, and now we started the second book in that series last night, The Tombs of Atuan, which is another fun book. So yeah, I'm going to start including those in my updates because it's the books I read with him are almost as fun as the ones I read for myself. So,
Did you
which I'm
finish
reading.
Mexican Gothic?
I did.
Did you
I
love it?
did. I did. I really loved it. And I was at the point last week where it's like if I would have said what I would just happened, it would have completely spoiled the whole
Right.
thing.
I'm glad we
So
didn't put spoilers in last
you
week.
can probably guess where I was. It was really a great book. It wrapped nicely. I'm envious of that wrappability that she put into that book. It really wrapped in a chapter like a good book should. You know, there's not that falling action that takes like 5 or 6 chapters. That's more self-criticism. I think I take forever to wrap up a book. But yeah, I loved it. Thought it was really great. And then I ended up having like a powwow on Zoom with some of my gaming friends, and the horror aficionado in that group was like, wasn't scary enough for me. So
yeah, it's very
not for everybody.
atmospheric. Yeah.
Very atmospheric. If you need a little more visceral stuff, you're probably not going to want that book. But yeah, I loved it. And now I'm reading Blood Rights, the next book in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, which is, those books just pages just peel away like nothing else. So they're really fun.
All right. So let's talk about a year in review. So in preparation for this, normally at the end of each month, I do a monthly review, and then at the end of the year, I do an end of the year review, which involves looking at all of my monthly reviews and kind of extrapolating from that, like how my year went.
That's very data driven. I like that. It's not anecdotal. I feel like you're going with data.
It is. It's anecdotal data.
All right, but I can't remember
guess.
January of last year. I don't remember. I have like this very nebulous impression of my year, but I like how you're data driven. So that's what I like about you in general, but it's kind of fun now.
So I didn't do a December monthly review because we're only halfway through the month. So, but it's December.
Yeah,
so I was
early.
able to, look over the majority of the year, obviously. And then I looked at my planner from 2021 to see like, how was I different last year from this year? And, just tried to get a vibe. I think this year went pretty well for me personally. I feel like there was a lot of I feel like I did a better with balance. I think that was my big takeaway. in review. Often I feel extremist, like I'll hang out too long in this area of my life and then this other part suffers. And my favorite days are always the ones that have a little bit of everything that just make me happy, whether that's, working on client work and working my own creative projects and, spousal time and connection with friends and rest and self-care, like when it just encompasses all of those things in one day, those are usually the magical days for me. So I feel like I did pretty well overall in balancing all of the areas of my life throughout the year. Obviously, some months were a little bit less than what I would hope, but I also feel like I'm more confident this year than last. I've been doing this podcast with you for a year now, and I, liked all of the podcast episodes that I did before you joined the podcast, but I feel like, I don't know, our conversations have given me a little bit more confidence, I think, in my own teaching style and coaching. And I don't know if that's because we get to bounce ideas off of each other every week or what, but that has something that has changed in me, I think, this year. I've also been just more focused on my health this year, acknowledging my anxiety. I understand better about what my self-care needs are. So that's important just for longevity and sustainability in
Right.
doing this career.
Right.
Yeah. So going forward, I think as I enter 2023, leaving out goals and plans at this point, I think just in general, like the advice I would give myself going forward into 2023 would be
I
to
love this part.
what?
What advice would you give yourself? I always think my ears perk up when I listen to an interview and somebody asks that question because I think it's always so revealing. So not to
Um,
put you on the spot, but
no. Because I've already done all this reflection, so I'm not really like, this isn't off the cuff stuff. It's just more,
right.
I think that knowing that my job change is imminent, like I'm going to have a different routine. And I know that there will be some exploration and transition and, just recalibrating that will happen. We talked about, what was the code phrase that we had? Anticipated gratitude or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm looking forward to it. I'm super happy about it. And I know that there has to be some sort of rockiness to it. There's
Oh
going to
yeah.
be
Yeah.
some
That
adjustment
you can't
that,
predict.
yeah,
You can't predict
I'm
it.
looking
It'll
forward
happen
to
in a
it,
place
but
you don't even know.
there's going to be something I'm sure that will, like, oh, I didn't even think about this being an issue. And so I just allowing myself the space to evolve and explore and transition into whatever this writing career is going to be for me. And just collect that data.
You are so,
Learn about
I love it.
myself, that's
I
kind of
love
what
how data driven you are.
my advice to myself would be that, yeah, just go in hoping to fully understand my process and how long things take and relax into it all. And here was the clincher for me, was not to make up my mind yet. I
Mm.
think that I jump to conclusions about myself and I set up expectations and because I don't know what I don't know yet, going into this full-time author life, I don't want to make up my mind yet about what it's going to be. So that's my advice to myself.
I
What
just
about
gave you this
you?
one right here.
Mwah.
I just went like that. Like, yeah,
Chef's
yeah,
kiss.
you took a lot of mine. You took a lot of mine.
Oh,
Somehow we had the
sorry.
same year. Just just kidding.
Ditto.
Well, I'll start where you ended. Like the advice to myself. Again, I love this part of any interview. And one of my favorite lines from any movie is from a movie called The Croupier. And then there's a line where he says, "Hold on tightly, let go lightly."
Mm,
And that's my advice for me going into this year, it's I always try to keep that in mind, but that's really for me going into next year, like the advice I'm going to keep. And for me, that line means like, hold on to what works, let go of what doesn't. So embrace what works and let go of what doesn't, and being in that mind frame of doing that. And I think that this year for me has been more, I've been able to do that more than I've ever been able to do it before. I think anybody who's listened to this podcast would, or been spent any time around me knows that I can be pretty, hard on myself. I can be pretty really self-critical. I can spend a lot of time trying to like perfect things before I even do them. And so like I'm letting a lot of that stuff go. Like that's just, you have to be self-critical in the fact that like, if something doesn't work, you have to be honest with yourself and say, yep, this didn't work. Got to let it go. So I saw myself doing that a lot this year. There was a point, I think at the end of the summer, early fall, where I was kind of writing the wrong book. I was writing the book that I wanted to instead of the book that needed to be written in the series. I think an earlier version of me would have stuck on that a little longer and stubbornly tried to make it work. Didn't, just let it go. Said, all right, this is here. I will come back to this. I will, but this is the thing that needs to get done now. I think there's this like idea of like what you're supposed to do, that I have this idea of what I'm supposed to do. And I can be really dogmatic about it. So this year's been a lot of like just recognizing like what those, like when that impulse is right, and recognizing when that impulse is not, and acting accordingly when you make that recognition, and taking the time. I think you have to take the time to grieve the wrong decision. And I do that. Like, all right, was on the wrong track for a while. I can feel bad about that for a while, but not letting yourself get caught up in it. I saw myself doing a lot more of that. Just like I had my little bit of grief for something I did that didn't work, and now I'm moving forward. But I really feel like going, what this all sort of prepares for is that, like, I think I have a better grasp of, and I think it comes a lot from talking to you on a regular basis. Cause when I think about our Wednesday mornings together, I really think about it like, I think of it more like we're going to have a conversation that's going to end up in a podcast.
Yeah.
Instead of like, we're doing a podcast and how do we make it the conversation fit? And I
think
for
that's
years,
how not to interrupt, but I think that's what makes our podcast a little bit different than the other writing podcasts, because we are
I
just
think so.
having conversations about stuff that matters to the author life.
Yeah. And I think we present two different ways of doing it, or like one of us is doing it, the other one's preparing, or vice versa. And so it has this, like, we're never in the same place. And I think we have complementary views. But I think that, having a regular conversation with someone in the community whose views are complementary to mine has been really beneficial. It's allowed me to, like, something I didn't do going into last year, or this year, but I do on a regular basis. I take like a day a week, or at least an afternoon a week, to sit down with the day planner and the idea book and say, okay, what am I doing? How am I, what's coming up? What do I need to do? It's like, it's my time to wrangle the practical things, which for me are always the hardest things to wrangle. I'm like, I could just sit here and write for 6 hours a day for the rest of my life, and then I would just have thousands of pages. But I need that little bit of time to like figure out how am I gonna do it, work with it. I didn't give myself that time before, but talking to you and talking to the audience about the writer life, I've started to see, okay, this is a part of it. You have to be planful and methodical about not just doing it, but then like having an idea of how you're. Yeah. And for a long time, I think for me, the business, and I'm running, and you're going to feel this too. Like, I'm running 2 full-time businesses at the same time. I'm trying to like create the author business and make that a profitable and bountiful part of my world, while also running an author services business that is sustainable. Like, so finding that balance this year has been amazing. And but also I think like you're striving for balance, you never have it. But I know how better to strive for balance. I think I'm saying that the long-winded way. I know better how to strive for the balance I need now than I did before. I know how to make that balance something that I'm striving for and not putting my family, in the crosshairs of it. I know how to stop and say, you know what? Elijah's got the afternoon off. Nothing's pressing. Let's go bowling and move and be able to do that. I need to live the life. If I'm not living a life, there's nothing for me to write about. So I guess like this year has been a lot about that. There's a picture from the first year that I went freelance, and it's a summer picture. I'm in my backyard. I'm sitting under the grape arbor. I've got a lunch and I've got a glass of wine, and it's this beautiful scene. And there's this, every time that Facebook reminds me of that picture, it's like, that's what I thought balance was like that. Like I get to sit outside and have this, but it's so much more. And so I always see that picture come up and think like it's balance is something you do in every hour of the day. It's in every part of your day plan. It's in every part of how you're putting things together. And I think getting there for me, getting to this place where I feel like as balanced as ever, I feel as optimistic as I've ever felt going into like I've got this Patreon thing. I've got 2 books plotted out, ready to go. I've got an open mind for maybe like sort of starting another series and having something to go, going with that. I used to hear other authors on podcasts interviewed, and I'd think I'd be envious and I'd think it's not attainable. And now I look at it and say, oh no, I'm like right on that groove. I'm like in that groove. It's just execution and
how many
evolution
years
at this
have you
point.
been full-time writing /
Well,
author business? I
well,
forget.
so yeah, this is 10 years as a freelancer.
Okay.
I would say the first probably 7 of those years were running the author service, like running the ghostwriting and editing business into the ground. Not into the ground in that like it into failure, but like running it to like, the only way I know how to run this business is in 5th gear. And I didn't know how to balance it. I didn't know how to be an author for me, write my book, and also write theirs. That in the last 3 or 4 years has become like, that's the balance I've worked tirelessly for, because ultimately I could go ghostwrite 10 books next year and none of my name never gets on any of them, and
This is good
whatever.
information for me. So I'm hoping that I can just skip to the end and be where you are now next month, but I don't know that will
The
happen.
advice that I would have given myself when I started was, don't wait to do the thing I wanted to do. Because I had this idea of like, oh, I'll establish the ghostwriting business and I'll become like I'll run that business like a Mac, and then I'll start doing the other thing. But you really lose when you're just thinking one track, like you really lose. Momentum. And so I think a lot of like my last four years have been like just pulling apart that one track thinking and trying to find a way to, and look, like the business doesn't have to be, I have a couple of colleagues in the ghostwriting world that are like, this is the only thing they write. And so for them, it's like a maniacal pursuit for, another client. Whereas I feel a little bit more like the client that I don't get might actually lead to the time to finish that book and get the book out and
Yeah.
And that ultimately leads to what I want. And so
it's all,
I don't know what kind of update that was. It's less data and analytical, but I feel like the impressionistic is what I sort of, how I look at my year. And I don't think I had this sort of balance. I know I didn't have this sort of confidence. And I don't think I had this going into this year without even having our conversations. Like I didn't really have like a sounding board. So all of those things going into next year make me feel like it's time to go. And I'll have to say, this year has been not the end of FOMO, but like FOMO has a box in my world, and I look at things, I get oh my gosh, this person's doing something and I'm not doing it. And but I put it in a box and say, you know what? I can't do everything. I'm not at the place where I can do an NFT or, you know, what these other
Uh-huh.
people are doing, like whatever the flavor of the month is, like I'm just not in the place to do that right now.
Yeah.
Maybe in 2 or 3 years with 7 books on the shelf in a series that are well received, maybe then I'll have the time and place to do that. But I can't also beat myself up that I'm not like running TikTok right now either, like some authors are. So I'm done with FOMO. It has a box. I throw it in there and I'm done with it.
I addressed my FOMO this year too. That's really interesting. I'm not saying that mine's in a box yet, but at least I can look at it and tell it to heal.
Yeah, right. Right.
No. Um, all
You
right.
have
Do
to
you?
have that, right? You have to
Yeah.
look at things and like with want more. If you don't do that, you're not going to be a very ambitious business person, whether it's creative or author services. You just have to have a context for wanting more. You can't write book 10 until you write book 1.
Damn it.
Right. Yeah, right. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's the facts of life.
It is. Well, I was thinking maybe we would look through the podcast episodes and kind of review those, but I'm not sure actually how to do that. I feel like, well, I know how to do it. When we started, we came up with we called them soft topics and like not hard
Hard top, like
topics.
crafty, harder topics.
Craft,
Yeah.
yeah. So more crafty and then more like author lifey, like mindset sort of stuff. And we tried to have a balance of both of those and go back and forth.
Right.
We also went through the story rubric, which I thought was really interesting. We interviewed
Yeah.
a couple of experts in certain fields. That was really fun. We did your coaching. That was really fun for me. The follow-up
Yeah.
coaching and that was really super fun. And yeah, I learned so much from you this year, about the submissions and we both, have Patreons now, or yours is going to launch in a couple of weeks. I think we covered a lot of topics, being able to talk
Yeah.
about stuff every week means that we talk about a lot of stuff.
We do. We do.
And I wonder, at some point, like the topics themselves will start coming back around, but I'm looking forward to seeing if, our minds change about things, or if we, start evolving and doing something in a different way, and we can share that. Yeah, I'm
And
curious
these
to see
topics,
how it comes up.
right. And these topics change too. Like anything we would talk about, like on a business side, I think by the time we come back around to it, one of us will either have tackled that topic more readily or
Hmm.
differently, or the topic will have evolved. I mean, just, talking about cover design, now we have this conversation about AI art and whether or not that's going to replace cover designers. And there's a lot of people in a very necessary way wringing their hands about AI. It's like, maybe the next time we talk about covers, we'll embrace like that part of the conversation. I don't know. I think I think that element right there is like why it's the author's life. It's not like
Yeah.
you're not checking boxes. There's no process here. There's no like, all right, I've mastered marketing. Like you better never say that out loud, because it's, at least not jokingly, you better not say that, seriously.
Oh, I'm
I
really
think
looking
that's where
forward
we
to this year.
Yeah, me too. And I do look forward to circling back to topics and saying, like, seeing them differently, or rethinking those things. Cause again, you're going to be in 3 months, you're going to be in the teeth of something. Like you said, you're going to hit a skid that you didn't expect, and
And we'll talk
it will
about it.
reflect. Yeah, we'll talk about it. You'll hear it here.
You'll hear it here, folks. Oh, awesome. So next next week,
Ooh,
um, I actually forgot to look it up.
I think we're doing a tarot, right?
I like that idea. That was just an idea that I threw out.
I turned mine for today. So yeah,
Oh,
I do mine.
what's your
It's good
card
to
for
hear.
today? I didn't take one this morning.
It's the Page of Cups.
What does that mean to you?
I haven't really, I just turned it over right before I got onto the call, so I haven't really had time
To process it.
to think about it. But and what I've also found when I read about tarot cards is that the images in that are discussed in the books are usually like different than my deck. So it'll like the way they're depicted, they'll like the descriptions of how like how a character is depicted in a certain card isn't how mine is depicted. So
Mm-hmm.
I have this like, I mean I look at this guy as he's kneeling in service to something. There's a bit of grief in it, but if I go look at read my book about what it means, it's sometimes like, oh, that's not what that card means. And I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how far to I don't know how to embrace my little tarot thing in the morning. So I'm going to be interested to sit and listen and contribute to maybe you're leading that tarot conversation and how you go about turning a card. And
Well, here's a little teaser then, I guess. So every year, as part of my getting ready for the coming year and introducing myself to my new planner, is to
I
do
love this.
a 12 cards, well, 13 card spread actually. So I draw a card for every month of the year and then a card
Oh,
for the year. And I take a picture of it, and then I also do a little bit of reading on what those cards are and mean. And I have back pages in my planner where I kind of artistically and creatively like create pages in the back of my planner that remind me of what those cards are and what it meant. So then when it comes time to set up my, March month, then I look at
right,
what the March card was and incorporate that into the design of my um, decoration, if you will, for those March pages and think about that as I'm going into the month and remind myself of it. So it's kind of like I use it as sort of themes for the month on what
right.
to like look at or yeah, it's just a tool to it's a tool for reflection and for manifesting, I guess, if you will. That's how I use it.
I,
So I am going to do a spread for myself, and I can share that with you, or we can talk about other ways to use um, tarot and oracle decks in your business or in your life.
I'm I'm interested in all of it. I turn the card every day because I feel like it gives a rant. There's a theme that I didn't consider,
Mm-hmm.
and it just is okay today. And I try to divine like my own sense of what it means, and then I usually just then go read about it and say, okay, today's going to be about this, or look out for that, or it. I think it inspires just a kind of what I think of as like sporadic thought, like
Mm-hmm.
or connection to something like that I wasn't expecting to be there. So let's do it next week.
Right
You'll hear
on.
it here.
All right. See you next week.
See you next week.